Silence falls across the war council. Around the table sit seasoned commanders, men who have led armies into battle for decades, who have conquered cities and defeated rivals, who have never known a woman to sit among them, much less to lead them. But today is different. At the head of the table sits a woman who has just taken the throne of Zaza, and she is not here to ask permission or seek approval. She is here to issue orders. The campaign will launch within 3 months, she announces. The target has been selected based on strategic value, control of key trade routes that will strengthen Zaza's economic position. The commanders exchange glances, uncertain how to respond to this unprecedented situation. Some expect her to fail, to prove that women cannot lead military campaigns. Others have heard stories of her combat training, her years fighting alongside her brother's forces, her reputation as a formidable warrior. All of them are about to learn that Queen Amina is not interested in their doubts or their approval. She has a vision for transforming Zaza from a regional power into an empire, and she will pursue that vision with a fearlessness that will become her defining characteristic. This is the true story of Queen Amina, stripped of legend and exaggeration, examined through the actual evidence of her reign and the concrete achievements that made her one of Africa's most extraordinary rulers. Why has fearlessness become the word most associated with her legacy? To understand Amina's fearlessness, we must first understand the world she was born into. 15th century West Africa was not the primitive backwater that European colonial narratives would later portray. The Hausa city-states were sophisticated urban centers with complex political systems, thriving economies based on trans-Saharan trade, and cultural achievements that rivaled anything in contemporary Europe. These states produced intricate metalwork, developed architectural innovations, maintained extensive diplomatic relations, and controlled trade networks that connected sub-Saharan Africa to North Africa and beyond. But sophistication did not mean peace. The Hausa states were locked in constant competition for control of trade routes, resources, and political influence. Military capability was essential for survival, let alone expansion. Weakness invited conquest. Strength enabled prosperity. Into this dynamic, competitive environment, Amina was born around 1533 in Zaza, a kingdom occupying a strategic position that made it wealthy but also made it a target. She was royal by birth, daughter of Queen Bakwa Turunku and a high-ranking official, which positioned her at the center of power but guaranteed nothing about her future role. What set Amina apart from other royal daughters was not her position but her choice. From childhood, she chose the path of the warrior rather than the traditional routes available to women of her status. This was not rebellion for its own sake. This was recognition of her own capabilities and interests, a decision to develop the talents she possessed rather than conform to roles that didn't fit her. She trained with weapons, mastered horsemanship, studied military tactics, and absorbed everything she could about warfare. Her mother supported this unusual path, whether from recognition of Amina's abilities or from political calculation about the value of a warrior princess. By adolescence, Amina was training alongside warriors, and by young adulthood, she was recognized as a formidable fighter and tactical thinker. When her brother Karima inherited the throne, Amina was already positioned to serve as a military commander, leading expeditions that expanded Zaza's territory and influence. This decade of service under her brother was essential preparation for what would follow. She learned not just battlefield tactics but the logistics of sustained campaigns, the politics of conquest and consolidation, the economic dimensions of military power. When Karima died around 1576 and Amina ascended to the throne, she did not approach rule tentatively. Within 3 months, she launched her first military campaign. This immediate action revealed several things about her leadership style and strategic vision. First, it demonstrated confidence. She was not intimidated by the unprecedented nature of her position as a woman ruler. Second, it established precedent. By acting decisively, she set expectations that her reign would be active and aggressive rather than passive or defensive. Third, it revealed strategic clarity. The target she selected was not random or opportunistic but carefully chosen for its economic and political value. This was conquest as part of a systematic plan, not as an emotional reaction or bid for glory. The campaign succeeded, and it inaugurated a pattern that would define the next 3 decades: nearly constant military activity, systematic territorial expansion, and transformation of Zaza from one power among several into the dominant force in the region. The fearlessness that became synonymous with Amina's reign was not reckless bravery or disregard for danger. It was calculated courage informed by strategic thinking. She personally led her armies, exposing herself to the same risks her soldiers faced. This was essential for maintaining authority in a military culture where leaders were expected to share danger rather than command from safety. But her personal participation was not suicidal recklessness. She understood tactics, positioned herself for maximum visibility without unnecessary exposure, and knew when to retreat. The fearlessness was not about ignoring risk. It was about accepting necessary risk in service of larger goals, about refusing to be paralyzed by fear or limited by others' expectations about what women could do. This is a crucial distinction. True courage is not the absence of fear but the ability to act effectively despite fear, to calculate risks rationally rather than being controlled by either overconfidence or excessive caution. Her military innovations demonstrate the intelligence underlying her fearlessness. She introduced metal armor to Hausa warfare, giving her cavalry a decisive tactical advantage. This required not just recognizing the value of better equipment but establishing the supply chains, training the craftspeople, and financing the expense necessary to equip forces at scale. It was a systemic reform that paid dividends across dozens of campaigns. She also built fortifications in conquered cities, walls that became known throughout the region as Amina's walls and that survive to this day as archaeological evidence of her reign. These fortifications serve multiple strategic purposes: protecting newly acquired territories, demonstrating Zaza's permanence, encouraging trade by increasing security, and integrating conquered populations through collaborative construction projects. This was sophisticated empire building, recognizing that military conquest is only the beginning of the process of creating lasting political control. Her campaigns followed strategic patterns that reveal careful planning. She systematically targeted territories controlling key resources, particularly salt and metal trade routes. Salt was essential for food preservation and had enormous economic value. Metal was necessary for weapons, tools, and the armor that gave her armies tactical superiority. By controlling these resources, she controlled wealth, and wealth translated into military power in a self-reinforcing cycle. This economic dimension of her military strategy is often overlooked but was central to her success. She understood that sustainable military power requires a functioning economy generating surplus that can be directed to military purposes. Her conquests expanded that economic base, which funded further operations, which brought more territory under control, which expanded the economic base further. This is how empires are actually built, through systematic expansion driven by economic logic and strategic vision, not through random aggression or personal ambition disconnected from material reality. But military success alone does not explain Amina's historical significance. What makes her truly exceptional is that she achieved all of this while operating in a context fundamentally hostile to female rule. Every decision she made was evaluated not just on its merits but through the lens of her gender. Male rulers could make mistakes and maintain authority. Amina had no such luxury. Any significant failure would have been attributed to her being a woman and would have triggered efforts to remove her. This meant she had to be not just good but consistently excellent. She had to win repeatedly, rule effectively, demonstrate strength continuously. The psychological burden of this was immense. Imagine knowing that your failures will be magnified and attributed to your gender while your successes will be minimized as exceptions or luck. Imagine understanding that you are held to a higher standard than any male ruler and that this standard is applied not out of respect for your exceptional capabilities but out of skepticism about whether you should be ruling at all. Her personal life became another arena where her fearlessness manifested. Various accounts describe her relationship status differently, but what seems clear is that she refused to allow marriage or romantic relationships to compromise her political independence. In a world where women's power was typically mediated through men, through marriage to powerful husbands or through serving as regents for sons, Amina rejected that framework entirely. Her power was her own, derived from her capabilities and maintained through her actions. Whether she never married, took multiple partners without granting them political power, or engaged in relationships on her own terms, the consistent thread is her refusal to share sovereignty or create male power centers within her household that might challenge her authority. This was revolutionary and required fearlessness of a different sort than battlefield courage. It meant defying social expectations, enduring gossip and criticism, and accepting that her choices would be used against her by those who wanted to delegitimize her rule. The scale of her military achievements is staggering when examined in detail. Contemporary accounts describe dozens of successful campaigns over 3 decades. They describe conquered cities, defeated kingdoms, tributary relationships extending across vast distances. Some sources claim her conquests reached as far as the Atlantic coast and toward the Nile, though these claims likely refer to tributary relationships or exaggerate her reach. But even accounting for exaggeration, the scope is immense. She transformed Zaza from a regional power into an empire, expanding its territory and influence to unprecedented levels. She maintained this expansion for over 3 decades, one of the longest successful military reigns in West African history. This was not a brief flash of success or a lucky break. This was sustained excellence over time, consistently delivering results in the most demanding arena imaginable, the leadership of a state in a competitive, dangerous environment. Yet despite these documented achievements, despite physical evidence in the form of fortifications that still stand, despite oral traditions and written accounts that consistently describe her military success, Amina's historical reality has been questioned and minimized. Colonial historians arriving centuries after her death often treated her as legend rather than history, suggesting that accounts of her conquests were exaggerations or folklore. This skepticism was selective and ideologically motivated. Male African rulers with similar documentation were accepted as historical figures. But a woman who conquered nations required extraordinary proof to be accepted as real. The resistance to acknowledging Amina's achievements reveals discomfort with what her existence proves, that African societies produced female military and political leaders of extraordinary capability, that gender limitations are cultural choices rather than natural inevitabilities, that colonial narratives about bringing civilization to primitive peoples were lies. These acknowledgments threatened ideological foundations of colonialism and patriarchy, so Amina's existence had to be questioned. The fortifications she built provide archaeological evidence that should have settled questions about her historical reality. These are physical structures, stones placed under her authority that have outlasted empires. They required massive organization, resources, labor, and vision. They prove that Amina commanded sufficient power to complete major construction projects across wide territories. Yet even this physical evidence has been subject to revisionist efforts, with some scholars suggesting the walls were built by multiple rulers over longer periods. This despite oral traditions and written sources that consistently attribute them to Amina's campaigns. The resistance to accepting her achievements is not about insufficient evidence. It's about protecting narratives that her existence contradicts. This pattern appears throughout African and women's history, where accomplishments are attributed away from African and female agency, where sophisticated achievements require extraordinary proof, where successful rulers are dismissed as legend when accepting their reality would challenge comfortable assumptions. What truly separated Amina from other rulers was not just her military success but her ability to maintain power for over 3 decades. Military victory is one thing. Sustaining authority over time while managing internal politics, preventing coalitions that might challenge you, maintaining the loyalty of military commanders, administering conquered territories, conducting diplomatic relations, all while facing the additional scrutiny that came with being a woman ruler, this requires a broader range of capabilities than battlefield tactics alone. Amina possessed these capabilities. She was not just a successful general. She was a complete ruler, able to win on the battlefield and govern effectively in peacetime, to think strategically about long-term positioning while managing immediate tactical challenges, to balance the demands of different constituencies while pursuing her vision for Zaza's future. This comprehensive competence is what made her truly exceptional, what explains how she not only survived but thrived in a role that many predicted she would fail in. The fearlessness that defined her reign had multiple dimensions. Physical courage on the battlefield, certainly, but also moral courage to rule according to her vision rather than conforming to others' expectations. Political courage to make difficult decisions knowing they would be evaluated through the lens of her gender. Strategic courage to pursue long-term goals despite short-term costs and criticism. Personal courage to structure her life in ways that preserved her independence even when that defied social norms and invited judgment. This multidimensional courage, sustained over decades, is what makes her story so powerful. She was not fearless in a single dramatic moment. She was fearless consistently, across years and challenges and contexts, demonstrating that courage is not just an emotion but a practiced habit, a way of approaching the world that can be cultivated and maintained through discipline and commitment to larger purposes. Her legacy has experienced a renaissance in recent decades as scholars have worked to recover her story from colonial distortion and historical neglect. In Nigeria, she is now celebrated as a national hero. Her image appears on currency. Schools and streets bear her name. She has become a symbol of female empowerment and African achievement. This recognition is overdue, but it also highlights how much time was lost, how many generations grew up without knowing this story because it had been suppressed. The recovery of her legacy is part of a broader process of decolonizing historical knowledge, of centering African voices and perspectives in telling African history, of challenging the Eurocentric biases that have dominated scholarship. This work is ongoing and incomplete, but Amina's case represents significant progress and demonstrates that even long-suppressed histories can be recovered and restored to their rightful prominence. Her story forces us to confront questions about whose achievements history celebrates and whose it minimizes. Military conquerors who build empires through decades of sustained campaigns are typically among the most celebrated figures in historical narratives. When those conquerors are European men, their stories are taught in schools worldwide, their tactics analyzed in military academies, their strategic innovations studied by scholars. Amina's career, meeting all the same criteria for historical significance, deserves identical treatment. She should be studied alongside famous conquerors, her methods examined, her innovations appreciated, her leadership analyzed for lessons that remain relevant. That this hasn't happened systematically, that most people have never heard her name, reveals biases in how we determine historical significance. It shows that criteria are not applied neutrally, that achievements by African women are systematically undervalued compared to similar achievements by European men. The true story of Amina, stripped of later embellishments but also freed from colonial minimization, is actually more impressive than legend. She was not a mythical figure possessing supernatural abilities. She was a human being who developed extraordinary capabilities through training and experience, who made strategic decisions that proved correct more often than not, who maintained power through a combination of military success and political skill, who built an empire through systematic effort sustained over decades. Understanding her as a historical figure rather than a legend makes her achievements more rather than less remarkable, because it grounds them in reality and proves that what she did was actually possible, that other women could achieve similar things if given similar opportunities and support. Legend can inspire, but history can teach, and Amina's historical reality teaches profound lessons about human capability, about the costs of gender discrimination, about what societies lose when they exclude half their population from leadership positions. What would it have been like to be Amina? To possess military genius and political acumen in a world that assumed women couldn't lead? To prove assumptions wrong repeatedly while knowing your successes would be questioned and your failures magnified? To build an empire while navigating structures designed to exclude you from power? To know you were better than the men who resented your authority, more strategic than the rivals who plotted against you, more capable than the rulers you defeated? The psychological complexity of sustaining this over decades is profound. It required not just skill but an interior strength that could absorb constant challenges without internalizing doubt, a vision of yourself independent of how society defined you, a commitment to your goals that could survive setbacks and opposition. Amina must have possessed these qualities abundantly. She must have developed reserves of strength that allowed her to persist when everything external told her to stop, to accept limitations, to settle for less than she was capable of achieving. If there is a central lesson in Amina's story, it is that human capability is broader and more varied than discriminatory systems acknowledge. She proved that military genius is not gendered, that women given opportunity and training can command armies and conquer territories as effectively as men. She demonstrated that African societies produced rulers and military leaders of extraordinary sophistication, contradicting colonial narratives about primitive peoples needing European civilization. She showed that fearlessness is not reckless bravery but calculated courage informed by strategic thinking, sustainable over decades rather than expressed in single dramatic moments. These truths threaten systems of oppression that depend on naturalizing inequality, on claiming that current power distributions reflect inherent differences rather than historical choices and ongoing discrimination. This is why her story was suppressed and why recovering it matters urgently. Every person who learns her story gains evidence that contradicts lies used to justify exclusion and discrimination. As this documentary concludes, the question becomes, what happens now that you know the true story of Queen Amina? You know she conquered nations through systematic military campaigns sustained over 3 decades. You know she demonstrated fearlessness that was not reckless but strategic, sustained not through a single moment but across years of challenges. You know she built an empire while navigating barriers male rulers never faced. You know her story was minimized and questioned not because evidence was insufficient but because acknowledging her achievements threatened ideological structures of colonialism and patriarchy. What will you do with this knowledge? Will you share it, helping to ensure her story reaches others who need to hear it? Will you seek out other suppressed histories, other leaders whose achievements were hidden? Will you question what else you weren't taught and demand that education systems tell more complete, honest histories? Will you apply the lessons of her strategic fearlessness to challenges in your own life? The recovery of her legacy depends on choices like these, on individuals deciding that historical truth matters, that suppressed stories deserve telling, that the next generation deserves better than the partial, biased histories previous generations received. Queen Amina of Zaza was fearless. Not in the sense of being unafraid, but in the sense of acting courageously despite fear, of pursuing her vision despite opposition, of maintaining her path despite constant challenges to her legitimacy. She built an empire through 3 decades of military brilliance and political skill. She transformed a regional kingdom into a dominant power through systematic conquest and strategic innovation. She ruled with a combination of martial prowess and administrative capability that would be celebrated without question if she had been a man. Her story is not legend. It is history. It is truth. And it changes what we know is possible, what we understand about human capability, what we believe about the artificial limitations that discrimination imposes. Her fearlessness was not supernatural. It was cultivated through discipline, sustained through commitment, expressed through strategic action repeated across decades. That makes it even more inspiring than legend, because it proves that extraordinary achievement is not the result of magical gifts but of human qualities developed through choice and effort, qualities that exist in all of us waiting to be recognized and cultivated. Honor her memory not just by remembering but by acting with similar fearlessness to dismantle the systems that tried to erase her, to recover other suppressed histories, to build a world where the next Amina doesn't have to fight so hard for recognition, where capability determines opportunity and excellence receives the honor it deserves regardless of who achieves it. That is the empire she built, and it is the legacy she left for all of us to expand and defend.